Have you ever caught yourself staring at your phone, waiting for her reply, feeling that uneasy knot in your stomach because the message you sent hours ago still shows no response? You tell yourself to stay calm, to act like it doesn't matter, but deep down, you know it does. You're restless, pacing, wondering if you said something wrong, wondering if maybe she's already slipping away. And the worst part, you hate that you care this much. You hate that you've become the guy who waits, who worries, who silently chases. I know exactly how that feels because every man has been there at some point. You meet her, she lights up your world, her smile pulls you in like gravity, and for a while everything feels easy. She laughs at your jokes, leans into your presence, and you feel like you're the man she's been waiting for. But then something changes. She stops being as quick to reply. Her excuses pile up. Her warmth turns lukewarm. And suddenly, the ground under your feet feels shaky. You're not just thinking about her anymore. You're thinking about what her silence means for you, what her fading interest says about your worth as a man. Let me tell you about Mark. He was in his late 20s, solid job, ambitious, funny in his own way. But when it came to women, he carried a wound he couldn't name. When he met Lisa, it was electric. They had long nights talking, inside jokes that nobody else would get. And she told him more than once, "I've never felt this comfortable with anyone." But then, slowly, she began pulling back. At first, it was subtle, canceling dinner plans, saying she was busy with work. But then it became clearer she wasn't as invested as she once was. Mark felt it in his bones, but instead of pulling back himself, he pushed harder. He texted more, called more, asked if she was okay, tried to reassure her of his love. He thought he was fighting for her. What he didn't realize was that his chasing energy was pushing her further away. Because here's what happens. When you chase, you place her above you. You tell her without words, "You are the prize. I'll bend, I'll wake, I'll prove myself to keep you." And the moment you do that, she feels it. Women don't consciously think, "He's chasing, I'm losing attraction," but they feel it. They feel when your energy shifts from the man who had direction and purpose to the man who now orbits around her validation. And when they feel that, they pull away. That's what happened to Mark. He showed up at her place one night with flowers, unannounced, hoping to surprise her. But when she opened the door, the look on her face wasn't joy, it was discomfort. She took the flowers politely, thanked him, but later that night she texted, "I think we need some space." Those words crushed him. He thought his effort proved his devotion, but in reality, it exposed his fear. In fear, no matter how well disguised, is never attractive. But here's the deeper truth Mark eventually learned, and the truth I want you to feel right now. Masculine men never chase, not because they don't care, not because they're heartless, but because they understand that chasing kills polarity. Masculine energy is not about pursuit. It's about direction, certainty, presence. It's about moving forward in your life so powerfully that anyone who wants to be in your world must keep up. Think about it. When you first met her, you weren't chasing. You were being yourself, grounded in your own rhythm. You had friends, plans, goals. You weren't sitting by the phone waiting for her validation. You were busy living. And that's what made you magnetic. She leaned in because she felt your independence, your strength, your focus. And the irony? The moment you start chasing is the moment you lose the very energy that attracted her in the first place. So let me ask you again, does this feel like you right now, sitting there, waiting, overthinking, replaying every word, every text, every silence? If it does, don't be ashamed. It means you're human. It means you care, but it also means you're at a crossroads. You can either keep chasing and watch her interest fade completely, or you can step back into your true masculine center, the place where you don't run after love. You create a life so magnetic that love runs toward you. Mark's story didn't end in despair. After the heartbreak, he made a choice. He stopped texting her first. He stopped checking her social media. He stopped trying to prove himself. Instead, he poured himself back into his fitness, his work, his friendships, and the passions he had abandoned. And slowly he felt something shift. He stopped waking up wondering if she would text. He stopped measuring his worth by her approval. And when she eventually did reach back out, curious, cautious, testing, he wasn't desperate anymore. He wasn't waiting to be chosen. He had already chosen himself. And that right there is where everything changes, because a man who chooses himself is a man who cannot be ignored. A man who knows his value doesn't need to chase, he attracts. And when she feels that, that's when she fears losing you. Have you ever found yourself staring at your phone, wondering why she hasn't replied? That sinking feeling in your stomach when the hours stretch into silence, when the message you crafted with so much thought is left unread, or worse, read but unanswered. You tell yourself not to double text, not to call, but the urge is burning in your chest. You're restless, pacing, scrolling through old conversations to remind yourself that once upon a time, she couldn't stop reaching for you. And the question that echoes in your mind is simple but painful: what changed? Every man knows this place. That quiet desperation when you feel her slipping away and all you want to do is pull her closer. But here's the part no one tells you. The more you try to hold on, the faster she drifts. It's not because she doesn't care about you. It's because she can sense when a man has lost his center. And nothing, absolutely nothing, kills attraction faster than a man who abandons himself in order to keep her. Let me tell you about Mark. Mark was a solid guy. Good job, decent shape, loyal to his friends. When he met Lisa, it was instant chemistry. She told her best friend after their second date. He's so confident, like he knows where he's going in life, and she was right. Mark had direction. He was training for a marathon, working toward a promotion, hanging out with his boys on weekends. He had a life, and Lisa leaned into that energy. She wanted to be part of it. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. The marathon training stopped because he didn't want to miss their weekend dates. Late nights at the office became early departures so he could pick her up after work. His friends noticed he came around less and less. Little by little, Mark's world shrank until the only thing left in it was Lisa. And at first, she seemed to enjoy the attention, but then something happened. The more he revolved around her, the less she respected him. The man she had once admired for his independence was gone, replaced by a man who needed her to feel whole. One Friday night, Mark surprised Lisa with flowers. She smiled, said thank you, but later that evening she told him she needed space. He didn't understand. Wasn't I doing everything right, he thought? But here's the paradox. By giving up his direction to chase her approval, he lost the very energy that had attracted her in the first place. That's the psychological truth so many men miss. Women don't fall for you because you make them the center of your universe. They fall because you are the center of your own. Masculine energy doesn't chase, it leads. It doesn't beg for attention. It commands respect by moving forward with purpose. Let's shift to another man's story. David had always been the nice guy. He'd bend over backward to make a girl happy, always available, always accommodating. When he met Claire, he thought she was out of his league. So he worked twice as hard to impress her. He paid for everything, texted constantly, told her how amazing she was at every opportunity. For a while, it seemed to work. She smiled, thanked him, enjoyed the attention. But soon, her responses grew shorter. Her interest faded. And one night, after he texted her a long paragraph pouring out his feelings, she replied with 5 words, "You're such a sweet guy." He read that line over and over, and the sting cut deep, because he knew what it meant. He wasn't the man she desired. He was the man she pitied. And pity is poison to attraction. David couldn't see it then, but here's the psychology. When you chase, you signal that you value her more than yourself. You place her on a pedestal, and the moment you do, she looks down. Not consciously, not cruelly, but instinctively. Because attraction is not about who gives more, it's about polarity. Masculine energy pulls not by force, but by gravity. And gravity doesn't chase, it simply exists, undeniable and steady. Think back to when you first met the woman who's on your mind right now. Did you chase her then? Probably not. You were just being yourself. You had your routines, your friends, your passions. She felt your independence, your freedom, your lightness. That's what drew her in. The irony is that the moment you try to secure her by chasing, you lose the exact energy that attracted her. It's like holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Masculine men never chase because they understand this. The moment you abandon your mission for a woman, you lose both. But when you stay rooted in your path, when you refuse to bend your identity for validation, you create the one thing she cannot resist: respect. And respect is the soil in which attraction grows. Mark learned this the hard way. After Lisa pulled back, he fell apart. He begged, he texted, he even showed up at her place uninvited. But then, after weeks of silence, something inside him broke. He realized he had lost himself. So he made a decision. He laced up his running shoes and got back to training. He called his friends, rebuilt his circle. He threw himself into his work. And slowly, the man he once was began to return. Months later, when Lisa saw him again, stronger, sharper, busier than ever, she looked at him differently. Not because he chased her, but because he stopped. And here's the deeper truth. When you stop chasing, you don't just shift the relationship, you shift yourself. You stop living in fear of losing her, and you start living in the reality that you cannot afford to lose yourself. That shift alone changes everything. Have you ever stared at your phone, wondering if she's even thinking about you while you're sitting there, replaying everything in your head? You scroll back through old texts just to remind yourself how it used to be, how she used to light up when you messaged her, how she used to call you first, how her energy felt effortless and warm. And now, you're stuck in this waiting game. Her replies are shorter, her voice isn't as soft. Her presence feels more like absence. And inside, you're asking the question every man hates to ask: what did I do wrong? That question eats at you. It gnaws at your chest, because deep down you know something shifted, but you can't quite put your finger on when it happened. And so you try harder. You text more, you call more, you offer to take her out, to remind her of what you have. But the harder you try, the colder she becomes. And it feels like you're trapped in quicksand. Every move you make only sinks you deeper. That was Mark's reality. Mark was the guy most people would respect. Ambitious, driven, the kind of man who knew what he wanted out of life. When he met Lisa, it was fireworks. She admired his passion, the way he carried himself like he had direction, the way his friends looked at him with respect. At first, she couldn't get enough of him. She bragged about him to her girlfriends. She said things like, "He's different. He makes me feel safe." And Mark felt unstoppable. But slowly, without noticing, he started shifting. The marathon he was training for, he quit because it cut into their weekend time. The nights he used to stay late at the office chasing his promotion, he left early to pick her up after work. His friends noticed he came around less and less, and when they teased him about it, he just laughed it off, saying, "You know how it is." Piece by piece, Mark's world shrank until Lisa was the center of it. At first, she enjoyed the attention, but after a while, something in her changed. She started pulling back, giving excuses, canceling plans. And one night when Mark showed up at her apartment with flowers, thinking it would prove how much he cared, she smiled politely, hugged him half-heartedly, and later that night sent him a text: "I think I need some space." That text broke him. He couldn't understand. Wasn't I doing everything right? Wasn't I showing her how much she meant to me? But what Mark didn't realize was that in trying to prove his love, he had killed her attraction. The man she fell for, the man who had a mission, who had a fire, who moved through life like he was unstoppable, that man had disappeared. And in his place was someone orbiting her, waiting for her, chasing her. And no matter how much she loved him at first, she couldn't respect that version of him. Because here's the truth. Masculine men never chase, not because they don't care, Not because they're arrogant, but because they understand that the second you abandon yourself to hold on to her, you lose both. Masculine energy doesn't beg, doesn't orbit, doesn't wait for permission. It leads, it moves, it builds, it creates a gravity so strong that she has to keep up. I think about another man I once knew, David. He was always the nice guy, always available, always quick to say yes. When he met Claire, he thought he had to work overtime to prove he was worth her attention. He texted her constantly, bought her gifts, bent over backwards to make her happy. At first, she smiled and thanked him. But soon, her replies grew shorter. She canceled more. And one night, after David poured his heart into a long message about how much she meant to him, she responded with 5 words that cut him to his core. "You're such a sweet guy." He read that line again and again, and it burned, because he knew what it meant. He wasn't the man she desired. He was the man she pitied. And pity is poison. The truth is, women don't fall for men who chase. They fall for men who command respect by the way they live. Men who are already full, already moving, already alive with purpose. The moment you start chasing her, you send her a message without words that she's above you, that you need her more than she needs you, and she feels that shift instantly. She might not even be able to explain it, but it drains her attraction like water leaking from a cracked jar. But here's the paradox. When you stop chasing, when you choose instead to stay centered in your own path, something powerful happens. She leans in. She feels the gravity of your presence again. She remembers why she was drawn to you in the first place. Not because you proved yourself, but because you didn't need to. Mark eventually discovered this. After Lisa pulled away, he hit rock bottom. He begged. He texted, he even showed up at her place uninvited, and every move only pushed her further. But then, in the quiet of his apartment one night, he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize himself. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped, his fire was gone. And in that painful moment of honesty, he realized something life-changing. She hadn't lost interest because of who he was. She lost interest because he stopped being who he was. He had abandoned himself. That night was the beginning of his shift. He laced up his running shoes again and hit the pavement. He called his friends, rebuilt his circle. He threw himself back into his work with a fire he hadn't felt in months. And slowly he felt his old self returning, the man who didn't orbit anyone, the man who carried his own direction. Months later, when Lisa saw him again, she looked at him differently, not because he had begged her back, but because he had stopped. She saw the man she once admired standing tall again. And here's the deep truth. When you stop chasing her, you don't just get her attention back, you get yourself back. And that is the one thing you cannot afford to lose. There's a moment every man remembers, the moment the bottom falls out. For Alex, it was a rainy night in November. He stood outside her apartment, soaked to the bone, clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. He had sent her 3 texts that day, no response. He had called twice, straight to voicemail. Desperation clawed at his chest as he stared up at the window where he knew her light used to shine. He wanted answers, he wanted closure. More than anything, he wanted her back. But the truth hit him when the door finally opened. Not with her smile, not with her warmth, but with the coldness in her eyes. She didn't shout, she didn't argue. She simply said, "Alex, you need to stop. I don't feel the same anymore." Then she shut the door gently, almost politely, as if closing the final chapter of a book she had already finished reading. Alex stood frozen in the rain, his heart pounding, his mind blank. That walk back to his car felt like a funeral march. He sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The flowers on the passenger seat felt like a cruel joke. And in that silence, he whispered the words no man wants to admit. "I lost her." The weeks that followed broke him. He stopped going to the gym. He stopped answering his friends' calls. His apartment became a tomb of old memories. Pictures on the wall, her perfume still clinging to the sweater she left behind. He'd scroll through her social media late at night, torturing himself with the sight of her smiling, living, breathing without him. Each image was a blade, each silence a wound. The worst part wasn't losing her, it was losing himself. Alex didn't recognize the man he had become. His reflection showed hollow eyes, slumped shoulders, and a heaviness that came from chasing something that no longer wanted to be caught. The confidence he once had was gone. His laughter was gone. His sense of worth was gone. All that remained was doubt. But rock bottom, as cruel as it feels, has a strange gift: clarity. One night, Alex stared at himself in the mirror, exhausted from crying, sick of waiting for a text that would never come. And it hit him, not all at once, but like a slow, cutting truth. She hadn't left because he wasn't enough. She left because he had stopped being the man she was drawn to in the first place. Somewhere along the way, he had handed her his crown, abandoned his mission, and begged for her approval. And when a man abandons himself, no woman can respect him. That realization hurt more than her rejection, because it meant the enemy wasn't her, it was him. He was the one who chased. He was the one who begged. He was the one who forgot who he was. And in that pain, something cracked open. He saw the truth that would change everything. Masculine men never chase, not because they're heartless, but because they understand that chasing destroys polarity. Women don't want a man who makes them his oxygen. They want a man who breathes freely, who carries his own fire, who invites them into his world but doesn't collapse if they leave it. That night was Alex's turning point. He didn't text her again. He didn't call. Instead, he set his alarm for 6:00 a.m. and dragged himself to the gym. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. His body felt heavy. His mind screamed at him to go back to bed. But with every rep, every drop of sweat, he felt a spark returning. Not for her, for himself. Over the next weeks, he rebuilt piece by piece. He reconnected with his friends, picked up his guitar again, focused on his career. Slowly, he realized something liberating. He didn't want her back. He wanted himself back. The version of himself that laughed freely, that stood tall, that walked into a room without needing anyone's approval. That man had been buried under months of chasing and doubt, but now he was clawing his way out. And here's the irony. Months later, when Alex was living fully again, when his world was moving, when he had stopped even checking her social media, she reached out. Just a simple message. Hey, how have you been? He read it, and for the first time, he didn't feel the old pull. He didn't feel the desperation. He smiled because he knew the truth. He didn't need her to feel whole anymore. That was the shift. Painful. Liberating. The kind of truth that scars you and saves you at the same time. He finally understood that chasing had cost him everything. His dignity, his respect, his identity. And the moment he stopped, the moment he reclaimed himself, he became untouchable. And that, brother, is the lesson Alex's heartbreak teaches every man. When you chase, you lose yourself. When you rise, you gain everything back. Have you ever asked yourself why she stopped treating you like the man she couldn't get enough of? You remember the early days, how her texts were full of fire, how she couldn't wait to see you, how her eyes sparkled when you walked into the room. And now she's distant. Replies come hours later. Her excuses pile up, and the warmth that once drew you in has gone cold. You feel it. You can't deny it. And deep down, the question burns in your chest. What changed? But Daniel, that question haunted him. He was in his late 20s, disciplined at work, admired by his peers. When he met Natalie, it felt like the universe had finally rewarded him. She was radiant, sharp, full of energy. She told her friends, "There's just something about him. He doesn't try too hard, he's just grounded." And she was right. Daniel had his own rhythm, his own path. She was drawn to his independence, the way he carried himself like he knew exactly who he was. But slowly, without realizing it, Daniel shifted. The gym sessions he never missed started getting canceled so he could spend more time with her. His side project, the one that lit him up, was put on hold because he didn't want to neglect the relationship. Even weekends with his closest friends started to disappear. Piece by piece, Daniel gave up the things that had made him magnetic, and he replaced them with one thing: Natalie. At first, she enjoyed the attention, but after a while, she began to feel the weight of it. The man she had admired for his independence was now orbiting around her. The spark that had made her lean in was gone, and one evening, when Daniel suggested another date night, she sighed and said, "I just need some space." Those words hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. Daniel couldn't understand. He thought he was proving his love by giving her everything. But in reality, he was suffocating the very attraction that had brought her to him in the first place. The first lesson was hiding in that heartbreak. When you abandon your life to chase her, you lose the man she fell for. Masculine men don't chase because they know this. Your strength, your purpose, your independence are not just hobbies. They are the fuel that makes you magnetic. Daniel didn't see it at the time, but his story was already teaching him. Women don't fall in love with a man who needs them to breathe. They fall for the man who breathes deeply on his own, who invites them into his life but never revolves around theirs. Masculine men never chase, because chasing is the surest way to kill respect. But lessons rarely sink in with one heartbreak. It takes hitting the floor to finally see clearly. And that's what happened to another man. A man named Alex, whose story turned darker before it turned brighter. There comes a silence a man learns to respect. It's not the silence of waiting by the phone. It's not the silence of unanswered texts or the echo of her absence. It's the silence inside himself. When he finally stops chasing, when he finally sees that he was never meant to run after anyone. That silence is not empty. It's full of strength, full of dignity, full of the man he was always supposed to be. Think about the men you've heard about, the ones who gave too much until they broke, the ones who bent so far they lost themselves, the ones who thought love could be secured by effort instead of presence. Their pain wasn't meaningless, their losses weren't wasted. Every heartbreak, every sleepless night, every unanswered call, each one was a hammer chipping away at the illusion that chasing equals love. And what was left after the break-in was something purer, stronger, unshakable. The realization that a man's worth cannot be proven, only lived. Because what she really wanted was never the flowers, the constant reassurance, or the endless texts. What she wanted, what she couldn't always put into words, was to feel the gravity of a man who knows where he's going. A man she doesn't have to carry, but one she can trust to stand tall whether she walks beside him or not. And when you finally see this, it hurts. It hurts because you realize how many times you gave your power away. How many times you thought love meant forgetting yourself. How many times you thought chasing her would keep her, when all it did was push her further. But then the hurt transforms, it shifts into clarity. You see that the moments you thought were endings were actually beginnings. You see that every rejection was a mirror, forcing you to face the part of yourself that was lost. You see that the only thing you ever needed to reclaim was your own center. And here's the deepest truth. Women don't follow men who chase, they follow men who move. Men who walk with purpose, men who live with presence. Men who don't beg for a seat at someone else's table because they are too busy building their own. When you stand like that, you stop fearing her leaving because you know you will still be whole. And ironically, that's when she feels the fear, not you. This is not about arrogance. It's not about playing games. It's about alignment. A man who lives in alignment doesn't lower himself to be chosen. He knows he is already chosen the moment he chooses himself. He doesn't chase because chasing is beneath him. Not beneath him because she is invaluable, but beneath him because he refuses to trade his dignity for desire. So when you feel that old urge to run after her, when the silence feels unbearable, when the doubt starts whispering that you're losing her, remember this: the only thing you can lose is yourself. And once you give that up, nothing else you win will matter. The story always ends the same way. The man who abandons himself will never be enough for her. But the man who refuses to abandon himself, he will always be more than enough for her, for the world, and for himself. So let this truth carve itself into you. Let it sit heavy on your chest, unshakable, unforgettable. The man who never chases is the man she can never walk away from.